Hey traders, this is Christian from Rqtf Trade Group, and today is Friday, May 21st, and this is your end of day and end of week market recap. So we'll cover some of the themes for this week, and some things to kind of watch for next week, and where really where my head is at in terms of strategy, and some of the individual movers as well. So we'll try to get to as many things here. We'll try to make this also a shorter video before we go into the weekend, because as normal, we do a lot of detailed analysis over the weekend for members, and we'll kind of save a lot of our analysis for that as we get through our normal research for the weekend. So theme of the day, market kind of ran out of steam today. We did also have monthly option expiration, which could have also had a little bit of an impact. But really, I think what we're dealing with this week, and what we've seen, I'd say over the last 4 weeks now, it's kind of the stick and move market. Meaning that you've been able to buy the dip in some areas of the market and take profits, and then really kind of wait for when the market kind of sets up a little bit better. That's really been, I think, the theme of the market over the last month. I forgot to go over the risk disclaimer. Here it is in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Everything that we're going through here is for information purposes only and education purposes only. Sorry about that. And if the video is a little bit blurry, it's because YouTube has not finished the high def rendering of the video. So just give it a little bit of time, and that'll take care of itself. So let's get to today's performance, and then we will get to the week's performance. And like I said, try to come up with some conclusions for the week. But SPY just barely did finish down for the day. Qs were actually underperformed for the day. They did finish up slightly for the week. Like I said, I'll get to that. The IWM small caps actually finished a little bit better, up about 1/3%. The bonds were strong in the beginning of the day, gave back some of those gains, but still finished positive for the session. Gold flat, silver down for the day. And the VIX was actually down a little bit for the day. In terms of sectors, there wasn't a lot of bright spots in terms of what, we kind of saw a deterioration of price action through the afternoon, and actually we saw that for the most part through the day. But your financials were the strongest group, right? KRE was up 1.3%. The blockchain stocks got hit pretty bad. There's more news stories and headlines about possible regulation of this market, right? That came out from China. We've heard that before from China, but I think a lot of people are kind of thinking about that with the amount of volatility that's happening, as well as how much margin interest there is, and how many traders are trading this with really outside margin, which is kind of a scary thing. But that's kind of the story with that right now. Other areas that underperformed. The home builders, again, they finished down. Again, they have not been strong now for a few weeks. They closed down about 1% for the day, so underperformed. The Chinese internets gave back some of their strength from earlier this week. They finished down 2% for the week. Biotech and healthcare actually, kind of sold off through the session too, which was, a kind of a bright spot up until kind of this morning. We'll talk about that for a minute too. So that's just the day's performance. Let's talk about some of the moves here. So we've got S&P. It's really tough to kind of draw a lot of conclusions from this. And when you look at this, so what do we know this week? Well, we tested this 50-day moving average. Right now, it's the second time in 2 weeks that we've tested the 50-day moving average to the downside, and both times we've had a pretty robust bounce, but we really haven't gone too far from that bounce, and you could see the price action is still inside value. So I think a couple things are going to happen here with the, in the next couple weeks. We know that we have this rising 50-day moving average, and while the price action made a higher low, which is a good thing, we're going to eventually, if the market kind of continues to go sideways, this 50-day moving average is going to come further and further into the picture. And either, I think one of two things is going to happen as the 50-day moving average gets higher and higher, is that A, number one, we could either, actually get out of this range finally, which we've been in for a month, and we could begin to kind of test those highs that we saw back in the beginning of the month. So, right, that was in the beginning of the month. That was yes, and so that's number one scenario that could take place. Or number two, we could go sideways and we do actually break the 50-day moving average. Or number three, we actually do start to break down a little bit, right? So those are the kind of three things. And, why that's important. Well, first of all, we don't know. No one has a crystal ball that can predict that future. But I think it's really important to kind of think about what you're going to do in each of those scenarios. How are you going to position, right? What's your strategy? What's your game plan? So those are all things that, we'll get a little bit more into that in the weekend member video. We talked a little bit about that midday today too. But so yeah, that kind of, for now, we're range bound. And it really, if you look at this in terms of the 1 hour chart, right, we talked about how this, first of all, we finished very close to where we started for the week, right? And we know that these value areas, the MarketWebs are doing an exceptional job at, providing or telling you where there's support and resistance for the day. If you drill down to the 5 minute, you could see very clearly that once we broke into value for the day, that was the resistance for the day. We made several attempts. The S&P made several attempts to break out of value and got rejected multiple times. It just kind of sat in here. So let's go back to this 1 hour chart just for a second, and I'll just sum this up here. But you could see over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, right? So this is now more than a month that we basically haven't gone anywhere. We've tested the upper range here and the downward, downside too, where that was bought, and again, higher low here, which came right on the bottom of value. But it kind of remains to be seen. And you could see where the price action is, and the new value area for next week, probably going to open up inside value unless something really big comes out over the weekend. How I'm kind of positioning for that is being a little bit more defensive, right? If I see something aggressive, or I think the buy the dip for me really kind of set in the middle of the week, and that worked very well. And then this morning, as to the game plan that we discussed pre-market, I got out of some of those trades regardless of like where the stock was, just because I did not want to hold that many trades going into the rest of today. And I took advantage of that of the market being up in the morning, right? And then can kind of reset for next week. I will say this, right? I don't think that this is a place to really get over the tips of your skis with risk. I think that you really have to kind of be patient in here and wait for a little bit better price action, and also have that flexibility that if we do dip, at some point next week and come into like 4109, that could be a level that we test and maybe bounce from. So have to have some reserves and some of that dry powder to kind of counter that action. And because these little dips that we've had over the last couple of weeks, they have been better places to deploy capital versus chasing into a green market, right? We know that hasn't worked, right? Chasing green over the last month, right, has not worked. So the more disciplined and the more that you can kind of quickly be very nimble and deploy capital when we do start to bounce, that's worked particularly well for me. All right, let's move over to the Qs. So that's a good portion of the strategy, but we did take out this, there's still a VPOC up here. But we did stay above value, even though the Qs fell apart a little bit there at the end of the day. And I think this will be an interesting one for next week. Right? So top of value will be around 328. Let's look at this daily chart. So very tricky. We actually closed back below the 50-day moving average. So again, it's tough to really say this is going to happen or that's going to happen. Again, we could draw out those scenarios, but I'm not really going to put too much conviction behind any of those scenarios yet, right? I see this. A lot of people like to do that in charts, and people seem to really love it. They say, "Oh, well, this could happen, and this could be da 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 da, percent chance that we do this, and then we could go back down, right? Or somebody could do this on their charts. They could draw down, and then they could draw up, right? And then you look at it, and you're like, oh, aha, that makes sense. Look at that pattern that could happen, right? That's kind of just completely made up, right? And the more confident somebody sounds in saying it, the more that it kind of seems, oh, that could happen. But I don't really. That's not analysis that I do here. I do think about the different scenarios, but I kind of wait for when they start to materialize rather than drawing all these different possibilities on your chart, going forward. Okay, so there's a difference, right? We want to kind of think about things, how they could materialize and what to do. But I certainly don't want to mark up a chart and say, all these different things, down first and then up. I think that's really not the best way to kind of analyze things. But that's just me, and everybody has different opinions. Small caps, sideways still, a little bit leaning down. If I had to guess, I would say that this could continue to kind of go this way because we really are getting stuck, not being able to kind of retake that 50-day moving average, right? Again, this is not anything, this is not any major, analysis. I'm just basically looking at the chart in front of me and observing, right? Rather than trying to do crystal ball type prediction. What we see here is over the last few weeks is that every time that we try to actually go higher, the price action is getting capped at those moving averages, as well as the point of control in the May value area, right? Now, again, we have not broken down yet, so it's really tough to kind of take that view right now. I think that you just kind of have to, again, wait for it and position lightly. And then, as well, we're going over the major indices here. But what you'll really find, in my opinion, is when you dig through the individual names and some of the sectors, you will get hints and clues about how this market is shaping up and which way it's leaning. For now, like I said, we'll cover that more in the weekend version. But a couple of things that stood out to me. Things like healthcare, which I came positioned long into. I had put on some calls, I think, in here, right? I think this was the 8th. This was earlier in the week. Sorry, sometimes the days mesh together for me by the time we get to the end of the week. But I had put some calls on here, and I added into the weakness here, and then I started unwinding yesterday, and I took off another chunk of this on the highs of the day. I even tweeted this out. I said, "Hey, healthcare is making a new high for the day." But again, most important print is at the end of the day, and again, the trend is still intact here, but it's just not how you really want to see a candle close for the day. So for now, I've got my last 15%, 1.5 of the position on, and we'll kind of see how it goes. But this is a little bit of a disappointment, right? And if you get into the more aggressive, XBI and biotech, right, which is equally weighted biotech, so the small caps get the same representation as the large caps. This could actually be a place to short, right? You've got a little bit of a wedge here, and this could start to break down. Notice that we didn't really retrace anything that we needed to do here, and a more higher beta area of the market. So this one, if I had to guess, is I think that this one, being that it got rejected where it needed to turn a couple times now in the last few days, I think this could start to kind of get back lower if it doesn't retake 127.37. All right, so that's kind of revealing. Another one that I thought was strong too is the IBB, and that's, of course, has more larger cap biotech in it. This doesn't look as bad, and you got a level to trade against here, which is going to be right around this 150 level. So that's something I will be watching next week. The semiconductors, which I talked a lot about, this week, right? Because I do view the semis as a little bit leading. right? We mentioned that they have to start someplace, right, in terms of recovery. This has got to do some more work next week, right? So again, could be an interesting tell next week to see if this stalls here, right, and goes lower. But I'm not going to draw that line yet, but I am going to be wary that we've got resistance to get through. All right, so that's just a couple areas of the market. If we want to talk about the Rqtf, because I know that's an interesting one, bounced a little bit this week and actually outperformed. But again, this is buried way under some things that it has to overtake. Right, it's way below. It's below the 200-day moving average. So by definition, it's in a downtrend now, and it really, other than having a little bit of a bounce here, didn't really go too far. Now, remember how it works. Things that are in a downtrend, they can bounce and they can float back up to resistance area, but you have to see, if you're interested in this group of stocks, you got to, in my opinion, what would be compelling is if it retakes some of those upside levels, and that has not done that yet. Right. So some of the other areas, more growth, have done a better job, in my opinion, at retaking some of those levels. All right. And that's kind of, brings me just to another thing that we're seeing all over the place is just having some of these growth areas, some of them not really full growth, but, like MasterCard, for example, saw a lot of calls go up this week, but a lot of names are just stalling at overhead resistance. Now, thankfully, we have an indicator that kind of tells us where there's some overhead resistance, but I think MasterCard was one of those areas. If I can just wait for this to, there we go. So that red line again is a virgin point of control, and things are doing a lot of this, right? They get up to a previous area and they're stalling, right? Another one was Nvidia, right, which I came long into the day because I view that this is showing some relative strength. But you could see on the 5-minute, right, this got to this virgin point of control. So again, battling with overhead supply, right, and that's an issue with some of these names that are retracing some of this price action over the last month, is that they're going to hit some areas. Where I'm looking to take off my final piece of this trade, because this name does report earnings, and I don't want to own a swing trade into this, but I've got my last target up at 612. Now, I almost got there today, so perhaps that was close enough, but I'll hold the remainder of a piece into going into their earnings report, and I'll take it off before then. All right, so but we're seeing this all over the place, right? Names will just get to that VPOC and stall, but it's a great place, for what we've been doing this week. It's a great place. Now, SE is kind of holding above there. Did take out a VPOC yesterday, so that's somewhat a positive development. But it really gives you some great places to kind of plan out your trade and say, okay, if I establish my trade on the break of value, I know I have a pretty good idea where I want to be taking targets, or at least targets. But also, you could obviously take your trade off there as well if you're a short-term trader. All right, so that's just kind of the summary that I see for now. If we look at the week's performance, you could see that the S&P, Diamonds, IWM, they all finished down fractionally for the week. The Qs did eke out a gain there, up 2%. Sorry, up 0.2%. Almost lost it there, very close at the end of the day. Emerging markets and international developed markets positive. Bonds were positive. Gold was up this week. Most of those gains coming in the beginning of the week. Also, one of the things that I would say too, that you really, helps to be nimble. Some of these things that are looking pretty darn good at the beginning of the week are changing by the time you get to the middle of the week or to the end of the week. So the rotation continues. And, for the week, solar was up 8%, clean energy. Obviously, there's some overlap in there. The gold miners, Chinese internet names, even though, like I said, they were down for the week. You had, just some different areas that you haven't really seen on the left side of this in the past few weeks outperformed. The semis were up 2%, FANG stocks. Biotech did finish positive for the week, even though slouching a bit today. Healthcare the same. And then if you look on the right side of the column, the negatives, home builders were down 4.8%. Let's look at that chart of the home builders. They call it home construction, but yeah, and I looked at some names in this group the last couple days, and I just said not yet. Let this kind of finish. Obviously, they got a bit extended, from that big candle that we saw that marked the top up here at 78. Again, this was a warning candle, and since then they haven't really figured out where the bottom is. I don't like that 50-day break, 50-day break of the 50-day moving average. We're still holding on to the bottom of value, but again, another, I would say, one of those areas to watch. Right, this has been a darling of the market and looks a little bit weak. Home Depot too, which announced a big buyback plan. Also, no bounce yet in that name since basically topping right around the same time, and strong earnings report. And we'll see where this kind of what this does next week. But I'm not ready yet to kind of commit myself to a trade there. All right, so that's that. Of course, the blockchain stocks got hit. Steel names also down another week. A couple areas of interest in this. The steel again. A group that was very, very strong. Talking about overhead resistance, you could see one, version point of control being taken out there. Another good example, and I think that's the last one, by the way. So interesting. All right, so that came all the way back from there. It's interesting how well these things are still honoring previous areas of overhead supply. All right, so U.S. Steel is kind of an interesting one to look at. I actually started a position here at the end of the day because it's been very methodical. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, look at the pattern here. Since this thing really started to get going, you had a virgin point of control get taken out here. So again, I mean, volume at price doing an amazing job. This takes this virgin point of control out from here, reversal. It's back into support. Bounce, takes this out, goes a little bit higher, fails, comes back in, spends a little bit of time underneath the 50-day moving average, retakes it. No VPOC here, but I guess couldn't really take out this peak. Comes back here, another virgin point of control from back in here, tags that beautifully, take your profits. This thing rests, comes back to the 50-day moving average again, bounces, spends a little bit of time grinding around that level of 20, 21.5, 22. Starts to bounce again, goes right back up to the next virgin point of control, and that's the high. So where is this thing now? Well, there's not another virgin point of control till up here. Here's a nice, I thought it was just, even though I really didn't want to add much risk at the end of the day, we came right back into the 50-day moving average. And now we'll see. Now, we don't necessarily have to bounce hard here. We could do something like this, spend some time, bounce around, chop around a little bit, and then resolve higher. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, and I put on a stock trade for that. All right, so very interesting. And again, just, how well some of these areas are behaving around, previous areas of high volume, right? Virgin point of controls. All right, next stock to talk about, Ford. Finally Ford, which has gone, and again, here's your ugly looking bar, reversal bar, and this thing has spent, a good couple of months. This was back in what, February? Yeah, so it's been, March. So it's been 3 months, right, since this thing has been kind of taking a break, consolidating, retook the 50-day moving average this week, and is now really nice move on nice volume. So I got long this name. I heard some good things about that F-150. So they've got some things going on, right? I know that there's this issue with the chips and so forth, but hopefully it is a temporary issue and people can buy more cars. But I really like the candle in Ford. A couple other names just to talk about. Upstart, good sign for the market to see something in a high growth do something like this and close to the highs of the day. Roadblocks, we've been looking at this name for the last few days, went back and forth with top of value, got the breakout here, and this was a hell of a nice trade in the Tribeca Trade Group room today. Speaking of which, let's I always bring up my chart, my trades for the day. Here's how I traded today, right? I like that Roblox trade. Another one of traders in the room attacked this thing right on the open, did extremely well on it. I got out of my little XLF lotto play, right? We saw some decent call buying yesterday. We saw calls go up in BAC, XLF. We saw a couple days ago Goldman calls. And today we saw a little bit of Morgan Stanley calls today too, which Morgan Stanley, just to go over one more chart, kind of looks to be the leader now in the group of investment banks, very close to breaking out. I also trade a lot of JP Morgan. That's one of the names that I trade in the group. Also a little bit of Goldman Sachs, but they're lagging a little bit, right? This Goldman chart looks pretty decent here too, but I love the Morgan Stanley. Sorry, another trader at Tribeca Trade Group, I think, added a position today. So we'll see if we get a breakout. Charts, the financials to me still look pretty darn good, right? No breakout this week, but close. They're close, and above all the short-term moving averages. All right. There's the Roblox trade. Like I said, I try to get out of some things that I got into yesterday. No harm, no foul getting out of them for around cost basis. And then I just decided to take off some other things, right? Stocks, which was a nice winner for me this week. Like I said, XLF, Lotto play worked very well. Here's another target that I mentioned in the healthcare ETF, which I mentioned earlier. Got out of a play on in CDE. And, what did I? Oh, Celsius worked very well too. Again, not a big position for me in Celsius, but thing closed at $60. So again, some things really kind of showed some life, So I remain pretty much. I try to remain. I hate this phrase, but the cautiously optimistic. But it kind of fits the bill right now, and we'll let the price action for next week, dictate where we go, guys. And that's it. I'll kind of end the video here. And if you like what we do, obviously in our in these videos, there's a lot more to it, than what we do on a daily basis. You can click on my profile link pinned to my profile, I should say, in Twitter, and you can click here. You can kind of see what some membership testimonials and what all the different services and features that you get from a Tribeca Trade Group membership. If you have any questions, you can always email me, but that's how you can be a member and kind of get involved. And again, I'll say it, I think we have the best community of traders around. Why? Because I don't think there's too many other places where we really are all a team and we're working together, right? Number one, we're trying to help each other out and earn money. All right, guys, and of course, learn. I said this earlier too in the trading room, and I firmly believe this. This year has been much more about learning, right, and getting your process down and improving your process and adding steps into your trading plan. Versus last year, let's face it, like last year was a more simple market. It still wasn't easy. You had to stay with trades, but this year is really where you're learning a little bit more, right, about how to be a disciplined trader and revise and improve your process. All right, guys, have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys on Monday.